No matter how hard you try to win at life, life seems to fight you every step of the way. You hit life, then life hits back. And when life hits back, it usually leaves a mark. What is the purpose of these marks? These wounds that dot the canvas of our lives? Is it just bad luck? Or perhaps, is God up to something? Maybe it's time to reconsider these marks, these wounds that life throws our way. Maybe they're the stepping stone to something even greater. Maybe it's time to embrace the power of our scars.
"27 more times Jesus is referred to as the Lamb in Revelation. And heaven's worshipers fall down before him saying, "Worthy, worthy is the Lamb who was slain." And the book of life is said to be the book of the life of the Lamb who was slain. So in no way do we ever want to forget, should forget, his suffering and the shed blood as the Lamb who was slain, the sheep of the scars, in whose blood we've been washed, by whose blood we've been washed. Once shed, though his scars are still visible, we are conquerors because of his scars. Isn't that the good news? That because of the scars of Jesus, we overwhelmingly conquer. We will worship him one day with the beauty of his scars. Think about that, how beautiful those scars are for us. They're not a defect. Some people would look at scars as a defect. I had this scar when I got this, it's a defect. But for him, it's glory. For him, it's a glorious thing for the saved sinners. Amen? So it's a good thing. So that's where I come from, the fact that I believe Jesus will still have those scars. I believe you and I won't, but he will, as a reminder, as a lamb who was slain. So let me get right at it. We have been doing testimonies and stories of people who've had wounds in their life and scars along the way. We have one more today, and this is the last one. And, well, I'll let her speak for herself. Here we go.
Felt compelled to share a story with everyone. Someone out there needs to hear it. In the year 2004, 2005, my mother-in-law had been diagnosed with cancer, and we believed that she had beaten it. In July of 2004, my mom had gone down for a biopsy, was found not to have lung cancer, or we were told she didn't have lung cancer. In August of 2005, or 2004, and tree limb came down and hit Dad on the head, broke his neck. He was in the hospital with, ICU because of his broken neck and issues that pertain to that. While he was still in ICU, Preble called me. I was in the ICU waiting room. Her 3-month checkup, the cancer was back, very aggressive, terminal. She was dying, and it's like, wow. Dad's in the hospital, I can't be there, and it's like, spend what time you have left living, for all you're worth. And, you can't help but pray. People ask you how you're doing, with Dad in the hospital and Preble fighting cancer, and kids are at home, and you just think, I'm doing better than Job, because at that time I had started the chapter in the book of Job. So I was just thinking, I'm doing better than Job. I still have everybody, in tough shape, but they're there. Then Preble died November 30th. And while we were arranging the funeral, Calvin shared with us that Mary's cancer was back, and she had less than 2 years, or they expected less than 2 years. In early December, Mom broke her leg. Mom did a biopsy again on her lungs and found out that it was lung cancer, and at this time it had advanced too much and was terminal also, though I don't think we found that out till January. And other people, and I always ask for people to pray, because believe me, the power of prayer, I have faith in it. And towards the end of January, I had realized I hadn't done any self-breast exam for quite some time because of all that was going on. There was a lump that was rapidly growing and I had leakage. So I made the appointment with the doctor, and she's like, I don't like this. She set me up with a mammogram. And I can remember laying in bed crying, because there's so much had gone on in our family. And it's like, God, my family needs me too much. Please don't take me. But if you do, give them the strength to get through it. And over about a month's time, it's probably due to the stress or whatever, possibly a tea I was drinking, my symptoms went away. The mammogram come back clear, and the only other explanation was possibly a tumor on my pituitary gland. But before we could follow up on that, the symptoms were just gone. Whether it's power of prayer, change in diet, lessening stress, although I can't see where that was, but but I still always come back to better than Job. Kept getting hit, and Mom had been in the hospital a couple of times with pneumonia, and then in July, my oldest son was in a car accident, and Pastor Tim had come to see me, wait in the emergency room with us at the hospital while the boys were being checked out. And he's like, boy, when it rains it pours. And it's like, God can stop it anytime now. I had gotten angry, and for me it's just like, I felt so bad about that, and I almost, I just kept thinking I'm not better than Job, because Job didn't get angry. But we're always praying. Mom ended up dying in October 31st. But there was so much peace, because I knew without a doubt Mom went to heaven, and she had taught us, all of us kids, to rely on God. If you got a thread of hope, He'll make it a rope, and you hang on with all you've got.
Lean over here, and
that she ended with. What's that phrase you said her mother told
when there is no hope, God gives her.
Thread of hope. If you have a thread of hope.
Yeah, God gives a rope.
Wow.
So that's great, and that all this happened. Having mother-in-law who has cancer, having dad get hit by the tree limb and being paralyzed, mom having cancer, breaking a leg, having sister-in-law who has cancer. You're concerned about your own health and all that. Losing mom, losing a mother-in-law, and Tim and Tracy went through some of this, having a son who's in a car accident, in a year and a half, just to bring all that in a year and a half, and it may sound like, well, that's quite a bit of time to some of you. That's not. To some of you, it might sound like that's a really short time. Yeah, when you're in the middle of all the junk, when you're in the middle of the wounds coming one after another, and they don't even have time to scar up. They're still fresh. They're still difficult. And, and on top of that, Elaine still deals with her legally blind, And so that just amazes me and awe. And some people go through things like that in life. Others of us don't have those things. I've lost my father. Kathy's lost her father. We've lost some things, but not in this period of time. And some of you know what that's like. Like I said, I've been saying in the past weeks, we've all have wounds. We've all have scars. And I've been giving you this definition of what scars are from the U.S. National Library of Medicine. And I'm not going to read the whole thing, but a scar is a permanent patch of skin that grows over a wound. I really haven't talked about the wound so much, but it grows over the wound. For us, as followers of Jesus, a scar is when we've been wounded in some way, whether it's a physical wound, car accident, whether it's been somebody else, an emotional wound, whether it's a financial wound, whether it's the list can go on. Where we've been wounded in some way, but for as followers of Jesus, in that whole thing, we've allowed God to work to heal that wound, making it a scar. Understand, it starts out as a wound, and then it becomes the scar. You know, it forms when your body heals itself after a cut, scrape, burn, or sore. You can get scars from surgery and all that stuff. Scars are often thicker as well as pinker, redder, or shinier than the rest of your skin. In other words, you can see, you can know that the scar is there. 1 Peter 2:24, Peter says about Jesus, he himself bore our sins on our body, in his body on the tree, so that we might die to sin and live for righteousness. By his wounds you have been healed. Understand, Jesus died so that healing from these wounds, from these scars, is happening and taking place. You know, it's not saying that he's going to take them away, but there's healing that happens. How many know you live with the scar? The scar is the mark. The scar is the evidence of something happening to you. We're wounded and God works. The scar is formed, and when we're asked about our scar, we tell others, you know, I was in this accident, and I have this scar now, and it had this, and you tell the story about the scar, and then you say, but God. Or I was in this relationship, and it was really bad, it was rough, it was tough, and you tell the story of what you can, and then you say, but God stepped in. Or this happened. And as followers of Jesus, we're the ones who can say, point to the scar, tell the story, and say, but God. And the thing is, the question is, can you, in the midst of your wound, in the midst of your pain, in the midst of whatever junk you have, can you look and say, but God? That means you have to be looking at how God is at work in the midst of that wound, in the midst of your storm, in the midst of whatever. He is at work. Sometimes we think, well, where's God in the middle of all this? He's there. The only one that has moved is us, right? God doesn't move. You can be never farther from or never closer to God than you are right now. It's up to us to recognize that. I'm getting away from my notes. But the important part is understanding that God shows up. That's so much of the healthy part for us. I mentioned Paul's scars. Check out what he says to the church in Corinth. So to keep me from being too elated by the surpassing greatness of the revelations, in other words, so I don't get big-headed about all this, a thorn was given me in the flesh, a messenger of Satan to harass me. Now, we don't know what the thorn is. We don't know what it was. It says in the flesh. Could have been a physical ailment of some sort. You know, we don't know what kind of ailment it was. But he says, a messenger of Satan to harass me, to keep me from being too elated. 3 times I pleaded with the Lord about this, that it should leave me. Understand, we're wounded. We're hurt. We plead with God. God, why? God, help. God, take this. God, make it easier. And it doesn't happen. God's not listening. God doesn't care. See what Paul says? But he said to me, my grace is sufficient for you, for my power is made perfect in weakness. He goes on to say, God says, you need me. You need me. It's my grace. Don't focus on that wound. Don't focus on that scar. Therefore, I will boast, Paul says, therefore, I'm going to boast all the more gladly of my weaknesses, so that, why? So that the power of Christ may rest upon me. For the sake of Christ, then, I am content with weaknesses, insults, hardships, persecution, calamities. For when I am weak, then I am strong. We get things come our way. Bad things happen. Wounds, causing scars to form. Paul says, you know what, bring it on. I'm content with that. Doesn't mean he likes it. Doesn't mean he's overjoyed by it. But he recognizes and said, you know what? I'm content with weaknesses. I'm content when my neighbor insults me. I'm content when life's not going my way, when I lose the job and I got to figure out how to make this work. I'm content when this happens. I'm content when I'm persecuted. I'm content when people give me a hard time and calamities happen. Because when I'm weak, when I'm down, when all that happens, God is strong for me. It's kind of a fuzzy way to look at it, and the world doesn't look at it that way. And sometimes followers of Jesus don't see that either, do we? It's always, why me? Eeyore. Oh, no, Pooh. It'll never work. We get this way. You see, our scars that we've allowed God to work in are the evidence of God's work in our lives. And it's the evidence of God's work in Paul's life. So the scars I'm talking about are those things that happen to us. And then we've been able to say, but God showed up. The thing is, too often we don't allow the wounds to heal. We keep picking at them. You ever do that? Keep picking at that wound. It never really heals. I had a thing cut on my leg and put a bandage over it, and it wasn't. I took the bandage off after some days, and put antibiotic ointment and all this stuff. It was still like, oh. So I left it off, let it get air. Guess what? Started healing, started scabbing over, started doing, So we have to let them heal. We have to get to them. Can't be picking. It's like splinters. You ever get a splinter, whether it's metal or whether it's wood or something, and it just drives you crazy. As a barber, I get hair splinters. They're awful. Now, you might think, hair splinters? I'm telling you something. Yeah, Mary's had them, evidently. When you cut hair, you cut it on an angle, and so it's sharp. It goes into a pore, and it sticks in there. And you can't always see it. Here's what you got to do. Sometimes if it's a light-colored hair, it's really hard to see, or if it's small. I've had them get in the cuticle of my finger and the abscess, and had to... Your hair is dirty, I'm sorry, but you come to us with dirty hair. So I just want you to know what I'm going through. Anyway, so the thing is, in order to get the splinter out, a lot of times I have to rub my finger over it, and when I do that, I can find a spot where it's at. And then I have to hold it up to a really bright light to see it just right, take the tweezers and pull it out. That's how our wounds are. Sometimes some of us we have wounds, but we've tucked them away so far, we don't know where they're at. We don't want to talk about it. We can't go there. But when we hold it up to the light of Jesus, the light of Jesus can show that wound and can start healing that, can pull that wound, that splinter out. Because it won't heal until that splinter comes out. The light of Jesus is what takes that from us and helps the healing begin. Over the past few weeks, when I've given you the definitions, like we had on the scars, there are some things I also read that I didn't put on the board. I'm going to put them on the board, and we're going to talk about those. I'm going to talk about those. So how your scars, one of the things was, how your scar looks depends on how big and deep your wound is. Our wounds can be large, and our wounds can be deep. The question is, the wounds that you carry, how deep is yours? Before anything happens, you got to recognize it, right? You got to recognize what care it is. You got to recognize what kind of healing it takes. So you need to know how deep your wound is. Do you have a wound that you've been carrying for such a long time that it hasn't healed properly? Is it a relationship that just totally wrecked? Is it a wound of unforgiveness, whether you're holding on to unforgiveness or whether somebody's not forgiving you? What is it? Is it a wound of finances? Is it a wound of emotions? Is it a physical wound that something happened? Nobody's at fault at it. It just happens. How deep is your wound? How your scar looks depends on where it is. Is your scar deep into your core? Is it one that was cut into your emotions? How many know that emotional scarring can be way worse than physical? I remember as a child telling a buddy of mine, we're riding bikes one day and talking about being disciplined, punished by our parents for something. And I remember saying this, I still believe this, that I always said, I would rather that my dad would spank me than to give me the lecture. Because, the lecture stays, right? The lecture stays with you. The spanking will go away, I can deal with that. But the lecture, the things that we say to other people stick into other people. And it seems like the more vicious it is, the more it gets implanted. You ever notice that it takes one bad thing said to you, but it takes how many good things said to overcome that bad thing? It happens. Where is your scar? Does somebody, some of us are, maybe it'll take, maybe it's an ego thing. If somebody just bruised your ego a little bit, and well, it'll just take a Notre Dame people right now, their ego's bruised a little bit. So in a week it'll heal up. It'll feel all better, Michigan State people right now, their ego's bruised a little bit, and it'll heal up. It'll go away. Life's not coming up. So the question is, where's your scar? Have you tucked it away and tried to ignore it from time to time, but you feel every now and then something happens and you start feeling the tightness of it? Next, how your scar looks depends on how long it takes to heal. Some wounds don't heal well, like I said, because we haven't addressed them properly. We haven't tried to make them heal properly. They've been ignored. We needed stitches. We didn't do that. Do you have a wound that you're ignoring? It can go back from way when, I don't know. Sometimes when I counsel with people, I find out there's something that's way back, and they haven't dealt with it. And so this next person in their life has to deal with this thing coming out of their friend because they're not dealing with it. Maybe we should get some help, get some counseling. Deb DeWise is awesome. Is really good to talk with. It can be a healing salve to the situation. Fourth, how your scar heals depends on your age. How many know that the longer we live, we pick up more junk along the way, right, than younger people do, and we just got more wounds than younger people, more life experiences. Therefore, the greater possibility for scars and wounds to happen. How your scar heals depends on your inherited tendency to scar. Some people are thinner skinned than others. Some of us are just thick skinned, and it just, it just doesn't happen. The thin skinned ones get hurt quickly. They're very tender. Some Christians are very strong souled, but very weak spirited. What I mean by that is strong souled, you're going to heaven, but while you're down here on earth dealing with everybody and everything else, your spirit is weak and it can't stand. You get hurt a little bit, and and so that's just how some people are. They're tender and weak in the spirit. Other people are much more resilient toward words said to them and actions of others. What's your tendency? And finally, it went on to say, scars usually fade over time, but never go away completely. How many know that? That's true. If the way a scar looks bothers you, various treatments might minimize it. For us, the treatment process is the one that's administered by the great physician. But it takes surrendering to Him, allowing Him to work on that area that's causing you the pain. And when we do this, we effectively then can use them as a witness for Christ. If we say that our scars are a witness, then remember that we have to be able to share them. We had Elaine share today, and she's probably got more if we talk to her. We had Bonnie share last week, and she's probably got more if we talk to her. We had Kelly Ross share the week before. She's probably got more. And we had a conversation here. We could get all sorts of stuff out. The question is, if it's going to be a witness, can people see your scar? And as a follower of Jesus, somewhere along the line, you weren't a follower of Jesus. Can people see your heart that's been healed by a loving God who cares for you very much? Do they know that you're a follower of Jesus? There's something I want to show you here. It's called Rule 15. I sent a text to Deb DeWise asking her some questions about emotional wounds, things like that. And she didn't get back to me. She did better yet. She put this paper out. I saw her Wednesday night. She goes, here, I've got this for you. She thought I was counseling somebody and that I had to give them this information. I'm looking and I go, oh, this is really good stuff. So I'm going to share with you. I actually talked to Deb and said, hey, do you want to do part of the sermon with me? But we didn't decide to do that, obviously. But so I'm going to share with you stuff from Deb. It's called Rule of 15. And I have this paper, and there's some more papers back there, so if you want it, you can have it. So this is from Deb. Don't think it's from me. I have added my own 2 cents. So I give you a penny for my thoughts. How does that work? Penny for your thoughts, but I'm going to give you my 2 cents worth? Okay, anyway. So here we go. Rule of 15. Number 1, the first 5. These are in 3 groups of 5. Okay, the first 5, she calls it the first 5, is feel it. Something has happened. A wound of some sort has happened to you. Feel it. Scream if you have to. Shout about it. Shout it. Sometimes, how many know, things happen, we just got to, Notre Dame, Michigan State fans, yesterday somebody's going, what are you doing? You know, but sometimes it just has to come out in some way. And then grow. What we mean by that, what she means by that is talk about it, learn from it, read about it, about what's going on. Grow, get information, knowledge. And finally, this is really good, cry. Sometimes, how many know tears can be very healing, just to cry? I'm not much of a crier. Oh yeah, Old Yeller, yeah, I'll cry. A movie like that, yeah. You know, tonight it's very, very possible that I will. But when stuff happens to me, I'm not that kind of, that kind of guy. And so, but these are things. Now, Deb gives a warning about this. If you stay in the first 15 too long, you run the risk of becoming a victim, and feelings will define you, and you will become weaker, and you will not get better. And I've added, you'll just get bitter. So the idea is the first 5 to get out of those. Paul tells us this. He says, we demolish arguments of every pretense that sets itself up against the knowledge of God, and we take captive every thought. I think that is so important in this whole process, is that these things, these feelings at some point we got to take these things captive, put them in the right place and right perspective for our lives. The second 5 is, first of all, okay, you got that first 5, you just gone through that. Second 5 is examine your role in this situation. And then take responsibility. You know, maybe it's something you feel like, I'm not responsible for this. Trust me on this. Everybody has a certain amount of responsibility in situations. Now, if you walk across the street and you get hit by a car, you can say, the car hit me. Or you could say, well, I wasn't looking both ways and I got hit by a car, and So we all have responsibility, and maybe you can honestly say, well, Tim, this happened, and I talked to this person, and just something set them off at something I said. How many know we joke with people, but we don't know what they've been going through before we joked with that person that we normally can joke with? And then all of a sudden they're set off. If we said something, lit the fuse, and boom, they're mad, they're upset. And it wasn't all the things that we said, but all the things that happened before we said it. Anybody relate to those things? Yeah, we do that. And so sometimes, we'd say, well, gee, I just joking. So maybe our responsibility was just 1%. Own it. Take the responsibility, and that brings us to acknowledging it. Acknowledge it. You can't change what you don't acknowledge. And then fourth is don't make wrong expectations. Sometimes we create our heartbreaks through wrong expectations. I have this expectation of people, and it's a wrong expectation. Sometimes we say, we don't have any expectations. Yes, you do. We all do. I remember when Kathy and I candidated to come here, Luella was sitting on that, and I said, okay, what are your unwritten expectations? Do you remember that? I asked what the unwritten expectations was, and they looked at me like my puppy does. Huh? And Lou goes, we don't have any. And so I listed a few things, and then around the table, oh, so we do have unwritten expectations we put on people sometimes, and making wrong expectations isn't. Here's one, number 5. Sometimes we expect the other person to change. Don't expect them to change. Don't expect them to change. That's a bad expectation. Who can you change when you have a relationship problem or an issue or whatever? Who can you change? You. You're the only person you can change. If you have finance problems, it's not the bank's fault. You, right? You're the one that has to change. If you've got relationship problems, you change you. And I tell you what, you start by praying for the other people. Praying for the situations, because God will change your heart in the midst of all that. If you stay in the second 5 too long, you end up with guilt, shame, become angry and revengeful, and then regret. So there's a warning that comes with the first 2 5s, the first 10. The third 5 then is create a plan to manage your new reality. This is a new reality. This relationship's not going to be the same. This leg that I got bummed up is not going to be the same. This whatever, make plans. And then to do that, make action steps. Okay, I need to And then become resilient. Resilience is accepting your new reality even if it's not as good as the one you had before. Resilient people have this uncanny tendency to bounce back, to come back at it. And then we have trouble. Then we have this time of, man, I don't want to do these action steps. I feel bad. That person hurt me. That car hurt me. That thing hurt me. That whatever. When you don't feel like moving forward, do it anyway. My 8th grade history teacher told us, sometimes in life, you got to do what you got to do, when you got to do it, whether you like it or not. In my 40-year class reunion, he came, and everybody in the class said, hey, Chuck, you got to do what you got to do, when you got to do it, whether you like it or not. So everybody in the class remembered that. Chuck Cheek. How do you like that name? And finally, then healing happens. Healing begins to happen. Deb went on to say that you fluctuate between the first 3, but each day you should find yourself less and less in the first 5. So moving out of that. And now you're moving on. Debbie gave me another thing, another saying, which I like this. It says, scars remind us of where we've been. They do not dictate where we're going. And that's so important. Paul also reminds us. He says, brethren, I do not regard myself as laying hold of it yet, but one thing I do, forgetting what lies behind and reaching forward to what lies ahead, I press on toward the goal for the prize of the upward call of God in Christ. So often we hang on to junk, well, no matter what it is, physical, emotional, mental, we hang on to stuff. And sometimes it's just time to put it to bed. How many know? Just time to get rid of that junk, unpack that bag, get rid of that bag, and move ahead because we're not moving forward with it. The Japanese have this wonderful way of redeeming broken vessels. When a bowl, here in America, when a bowl breaks, break a vase, break whatever, what do? Well, it's broke, pitch it. Go get another one, you know. But for the Japanese, they have this thing called kintsugi. And it highlights and it enhances this vessel. It brings, actually, in the long run, it brings value to the vessel. And I think as followers of Jesus, that's one thing we should be doing to other people is bringing value to them because we're all vessels of Jesus Christ. Now, kintsugi, I even put the Japanese up here so you could read it if you need to. Kintsugi means golden is kin, and tsugi is repair. So what they do is they take precious metal, and like liquid gold, liquid silver, or they take a lacquer dusted with powdered gold. They bring all the pieces together and use this as the adhesive to hold the pieces together. And then what it does is it really enhances the breaks in that pottery. I mean, it takes something that was usual and normal and whatever, and it can make it well, restart later. Absolutely absolutely beautiful. What is with this? You've got to get that thing offline. I don't know why it's there. It makes them absolutely beautiful. It gives it a new lease on the life of pottery and becomes even more beautiful because of the scars, the breaks. It teaches us that broken objects are not something to hide, but to display with pride. And we're broken, and we have breaks in all of us. So the question is, what are the scars that you bear? You can't heal from anything unless you acknowledge it first. And are you ready for God to heal those scars? So on your sheet of paper, if you want to, you can. Simply ask God, Lord, I give you blank. And you put your scar in there, what it is that you need him healing, my scar. Lord, I give you blank, my scar. And then what you do is you do all you can about it. We've given you the tool for that. You pray, you do all you can like everything's up to you, and you pray like everything's up to God. Understand that even though you and I may have some ugly scars, that you and I are still considered flawless in the sight of God. The song says, no matter the bumps, no matter the bruises, no matter the scars, still the truth is, the cross has made you